Hey guys, it's been a few days since the last patch dropped that nerfed the Hallowfalls and courier work boots out of the Corrupted Dungeons meta, and we've given it a few days for a new meta to solidify, and now I think it's time for us to take a look at what kind of builds are people playing in Corrupted Dungeons. So just like before, the first thing we're gonna do is pull up this Infamy ladder board, and make sure you click on this week so you can take a look at the most updated list of whoever has the highest infamy in corrupted dungeons. And usually when we look at the ladder board, like this first page right here, these people are the ones that are going to get their builds copied. So right now Drachnate is on top, and his build is kind of everywhere and kind of super obnoxious, but he's playing the Baton kite build. And this build, I think the first person to play in Corrupted Dungeons or a version of it is probably Trilobite with his I think he was playing this exact setup but with a Spectre hood. And we're gonna look at the different variants in a bit. But just for future references, this first page is usually whoever's on the first page is gonna get their builds copy. Like back when we had Rasper on this page, everybody was playing Play Bloodletter. We had Goof on this page, and everybody was playing One Hand Dagger. And then we had Minsu on this page. That's when the whole Hallowfall cancer started. And we had Sorcerer up here, and that's when a lot of people were playing Chillhowl. And Sorcerer just dropped out of the first page not long ago. I think he's still very high up here. So there's actually still a lot of Chillhowl in Corrupted Dungeons as well. But I think the number one build that people are really paying attention to and really complaining a lot about right now is this Baton kite build. So Baton, in case you don't know what it does, the E drops it shoots out a skill shot, and then on the first target that it collides with, it creates a little AoE, and then within that AoE, people that are affected are gonna get this dot effect on them that ticks every 0.3 seconds and does a lot of damage. And then even when they leave that AoE, the dot will stay on them for another 7 ticks, right? So this is a really good skill for ticking your mercenary jacket, which heals you a little bit every time that you inflict damage, right? With Mercenary Jacket and the E, you basically get like a full heal. You get like a over 1,000 HP heal, when you're high IP, of course. But like you get like a 1,000 HP heal if you land the E and the jacket together. So it's a really tough build to be like trying to kill, because they're just so good at kiting. It's really hard to get on top of them, and then when you do manage to inflict some damage on them, they do the whole like E immersion jacket thing and then just heal right back to full health. So it's really hard to kill this build. And okay, so let's tab over and let's take a look at how people are building this build. The demon helmet thing, there's very few people actually using this. I know Drachnate, the number one guy, is using this, but when I play Corrupted Dungeons, at least, I don't usually run into this variant. And when you look at this the numbers here, you see the win rate, the overall win rates of this build is not very good. So I think like Drachnate, and there's like a few people like Drachnate, and maybe Wayland's doing pretty good with it. 91% over 12 matches, right? And then Drachnate has 91 plus. Okay, 91 matches on it. It's 96% win rate. That's pretty damn good. But then like there's probably some other people you probably won't be able to see on this list that are just like not having any kind of success with it. So they're gonna be dragging that overall stats down. And what this means though is it's probably not as straightforward of a build to play as the other options, right? I think there's easier ways to play this build, like with a Guardian helmet. Click into that, and you see the overall win rate for this build is a whole 71%, so 30%, almost 30% higher than the other one. And then we have the Soldier helmet variant, right, 71%, right? So there's like easier ways to build this, and I think the top players, you might find Demon Helmet more popular with them. And I think the idea of the Demon Helmet is just you silence first and then you drop your E, so they can't do anything to like counter your E's damage. Um, but you could also just run Soldier Helmet, which does the same thing, right? You drop your E combo, and if they pop like a Hunter Hood or something, you just Soldier Helmet and block it. Of course, this doesn't help you against Cleric Robes or things like that. Um, but it does give you that bonus of like having that block against other things like Claymore E's, for example, against one shot Quarterstaff and one shot dagger builds. Right, so I think this is the Soldier Helmet is probably like the easiest version to play, and in my opinion, it's the best version. The Guardian Helmet is also up there, really good against curse players. It's also just like a really easy to use skill on the go kind of heal. You don't have to have your E up to heal with the Guardian Helmet, right? So that's really nice. And there's also the Spectre Hood, which is this is probably the OG version of the build. Trilobite, I think, used this when he played this build. And pretty self-explanatory. With the Spectre Hood, you get 2 Mercenary Jackets, right? So you can have a heal on your first and second E. And I think that's, like, that looks really good on paper, but I think Guardian Helmet is still just easier to use because you don't need your E up to get that heal, basically. Of course, it heals you for a lot less, but it also has a shorter cooldown. It also removes dots, and it's also just like better against what do we call it, like ambient damage, like damage from mobs, or like pokes here and there, reflective damage maybe. Like you don't sometimes you don't need that full heal, and you don't need to wait for your E and jacket combo, and you're just missing a little HP, and you just pop a Guardian Helmet, and there you go, you're full health again. Right, so it's a really easy way to do that. Now for the other slots, there's one guy using Knight Armor in here. This is really not that popular, but I've seen people do this, and the idea of it, Knight Armor helps you kite, and it also helps you keep people inside your Baton Bow E, so you can do a little more damage to them. Of course, you're using Plate Armor, so you're not actually doing that much more damage to them. You're just like not losing damage, I guess. But with Wind Wall in like the thing about Wind Wall in corrupted dungeons is there's little corridors everywhere, and Wind Wall really like works in like when you wanna just go for when you wanna go for a kite build, it just like really works for like cutting off a corridor and preventing people from chasing you, right? So it's good for that. And then for the shoe slot, you see a lot of Sentinels of Purity. This is probably the best in the slot, Sentinel of Purity. And then the leather guys that you're seeing are probably using Refreshing Sprint. Some of them might be using regular run, and if they're using regular run, they're probably just using the leather passive for cooldown reduction. That's why they're using leather. And then this soldier boots guy here, he's probably using regular run as well, but he might switch to Wanderlust against other people that are using Wanderlust. Right? So if you, let's say you face a Claymore using Wanderlust, or like a one-hand curse using Wanderlust, they have this one really long duration chase skill to try to like walk you over within that one skill, right? So if you use Wanderlust yourself too, then they can do that because you have the same mobility on your boots and more mobility on your weapon, or more kite, I guess, on your weapon. So it'll make it harder for those people to like walk you over with Wanderlust. But my advice though, if you're gonna play this build, play with Sentinels of Purity, and if you can't afford that, play with regular run or a Refreshing Sprint. Alright, so we're gonna move on now from this build and go to the next. Alright, so the next build we're gonna talk about, whoopsies. The next build we're gonna talk about is this right here, the Quarterstaff build. I know we skipped over the MRAC, but let's take a look. Alright, so I know we skipped over the MRAC, but that's because his last kill was in December 2nd, and in my opinion, this build is starting to get a little outdated. Like, there's other builds that are just better now, and they are definitely killing this build. And there's definitely still people playing this build. Now, I don't know if it's because they see DM Rect still on the top of the ladder board and they're just copying him, or if they maybe copied him before and they're just sticking to it. But if you just take a look at this right here, you see like he hasn't played in a while, right? So when you look on this ladder board and you try to find a build to play from this ladder board, make sure you're looking at something that's up to date. And the build that we're actually gonna look at though, that's funny. This guy's using DM Rex build and he died. But anyway, the next build that we're gonna look at though is this Quarterstaff build, and like I said, like all of these builds that we're looking at right now, they existed before the Hallowfall meta. They're just more popular now that Hallowfall is gone, right? So, don't think any of this is like new stuff. They all existed before. But anyway, the Quarterstaff build that Kraken plays, like in my opinion, this is a fucking terrible build. I hate it, but it's a very low damage build, but it's super super safe. Like you have a lot of mobility with your run skills, like with your Q and the W, both on short cooldowns and both giving you some form of a mobility, like run speed, and it's really hard for people to catch you. You're also using wind wall on your knight armor, right? So it's really hard for people to catch you, and because you have so much CC in this build, like a lot of the times you're gonna find that you don't have enough damage to kill the other guy yourself. If you if you face someone that's using mercenary jacket, for example, you're probably not gonna have enough damage to finish him off yourself. But you can run them into mobs, and you can just knock them into mobs with your wind wall and with your force field skill, like this one right here. And then once they're in the mobs, you can CC them, and they're gonna stay in the mobs. Like Quarterstaff is, probably the best single target CC weapon in the game. So if you send someone into a hooker mob or a fire trap, and you CC them there, they're just not gonna move until they die to environment damage, basically. Now, back on Albion stats, we can take a look at the different ways that people actually build this build, and you'll see in here. This is the version we just saw, I think. Some people are using Mage Cal, and I think Mage Cal is, in my opinion, a little better for the actual PvP part because the damage is more guaranteed. Like you don't have to rely on them to proc your cold cal damage. You just hit them with the Cal and the cape, and then you walk away, and the damage is already done, right? And also the other thing about the Mage Cow is like both of these options they're both cloth, right? So they both have that force field, which is really good for sending people into mobs. And last patch, I think it was the last patch. Yeah, it was the last patch. Last patch they buffed the force field skill on the cloth helmets. We can take a look at it right here. So now it sends people 14 meters out regardless of CC duration or CC resistance, right? So it'll always send people out a set amount of distance regardless of whether if they have like a fish buff on or if they're wearing plate armor or whatever, they always get knocked back 14 meters. And that's really strong, right? That's really good because you can you can send people back a really long distance without like stacking CC duration yourself, and it's just really good now for like sending people into mobs. So that's why you see like with this build, I think pretty much all of them are running some kind of cloth helmet, either Mage Cal or Coldest Cal, or even a Fin Cal. Fin Cal, honestly, I don't see the point of it. There's a few players using it, and win rate's not bad, but I don't really get the Fin Cal, to be honest. Like, what do you have to purge with this? I don't know. I've never in this past few days I've never ran into a guy that actually uses a Fin Cal. Maybe you purge like Cleric Robe or something so you can do your Demon Cape damage. Doesn't really seem, I don't know, but whatever. I think it doesn't really seem like a good idea to me because Chlorocope is something that you can bait out, and you don't really have to purge that, right? So anyway, I recommend either Mage Cow or Coldest Cow, and Mage Cow, like I said, is probably the easier one to use, and Coldest Cow though does give you, for the same amount of IP, Coldest Cow gives you a lot better damage against mobs. So that might be a very good reason for you to consider Coldest Cow over Mage Cow, because we're using a Quarterstaff with plate armor to do corrupted dungeons, so the PvE is gonna be pretty bad, right? So the Coldest Cow is good for that, and then you see some leather versions of it. These are actually one-shot Quarterstaff builds, and we're gonna go over those in a bit. But for now, like that's it for this build. Just keep in mind, like if you're gonna try this build, don't rely to don't, how do I put it? Don't try too hard to kill people with your own damage. Just keep in mind that this is probably like the best build for playing people on traps and on mobs, right? So keep that in the back of your head when you play this build. Oh, and also, before we move on, we should talk about the boots as well. So you see a lot of cloth boots in here. Cleric Sandal is, yeah, Cleric Sandal, Mage Sandal, like those guys are just using regular run. Hunter shoes are probably actually using the rush ability for the extra CC duration. But I think the Scholar Sandal is probably the better call. I don't think you really need that CC duration. It's probably better to just have that extra mana, so you don't go So like if you keep spamming Q and W on Quarterstaffs, you can go out of mana, right? And it's good for that, and it's also really good for the CC resistance. So if you fight against another Quarterstaff, or if you're fighting against like a one-hand dagger, for example, that uses that stun to set up for a combo, Scholar Sendo is super good for that, right? So that's my recommendation if you are gonna copy this build. Alright, so let's move on to the next build now. Alright, so the next build we're gonna talk about is the one-hand dagger. Now this is nothing new. A lot of you have already seen something like this before. Especially during the Hallowfall meta, this was one of the better builds to run against Hallowfalls. But the only thing new about this build is the boots option. So, like we said earlier, courier work boots got nerfed out of existence, and courier work boots is what people used to run on this build. Now they're running minor work boots. Minor work boots, take a look at this skill right here. It gives you a whole 120% movement speed for 10 seconds. But it does silence you. It makes you so you can't attack or use spells for 13 seconds, okay? So that's the whole duration of the run skill plus 3 seconds afterwards. Now, it's really hard to use these boots with any other kind of like actual PvP build. A lot of rats are using these boots now because they're the best boots for running away, and it makes a whole lot of sense to run these boots with the one-hand dagger because they rely on that one big old burst to kill you, and if they can't kill you within one burst, they might try to like kill you with a couple of Qs and autos, but they're not gonna use boots for that, right? So the only thing that they really need boots for is running away, right? Resetting. So Courier Boost was better for this because it does let you chase as well as run. But these boots, they're just, now that Courier Boosts are gone, these are the best options. And there are other people using other boosts, like maybe they don't have a gathering specs and they don't have access to the minor work boosts. Right? So you do see some people using hunter shoes and the soldier boots for the same thing. They're just run away. Actually, and for some people using the hunter shoes, one of the common ways to deal with the one-shot one-hand dagger combo is if you bring the CC resistance fish, and with the CC resistance, it makes it hard for them to do a stun combo on you, right? So hunter shoes to give you that extra ability there with a rush. You can use it on the engage to get that CC duration to like counter the fish, right? To counter the counter. But that's a really risky thing to do because if you use it that way, then you lose the ability to reset, right? And actually, if you click into it, you'll see the overall win rate with this build is really not that impressive. There's a few people with 100% win rate on it, but my guess is that they don't actually play the build a whole lot. Yeah. Um, that's that's gotta be the reason for that. And the overall win rate for this not that high, right? So like I said, that's because if you use the boots that way, it's super risky, and if you don't get the combo off, you basically die because you don't have a reset, right? So that's why people are using the minor work boots. All right, let's move on from this. All right, so next up we have Humperdinck's Frost build, and honestly, this is not a build that I recommend for anybody, because it's actually a really hard build to execute on. It's a very squishy build, and it relies very heavily on having like good reflexes and good ping to be able to like cancel out your opponent's big skills using your iframe on your W and your snare on your E. The snare on your E, by the way, is super useful for canceling out people's engage skills. Anything that's not a Claymore E, that's not like a Claymore E. So, for example, Brosworth, you can cancel out their E's with your E, double blade staffs, or even Bloodletters. You can cancel out a lot of those like long range leap skills with your E, but that requires you to have really good ping and really good reflexes. And if you don't have the good reflexes of a 20-year-old, if you have like old man reflexes like me, don't play this build. It's a really hard build to play. But let's take a look at the way people actually build for this. Alright, so here's the one-hand frost builds, and you can see there's some plate frost players still. They're pretty rare nowadays, but you can see there's a Humper's build right here. And all the people that are copying Humper's build, they're pretty much using exactly what he uses, right? So mage robe, some kind of leather shoes for refreshing sprint, and then the helmet is the only place where we see variations. And Humperdinck himself has used all three of these variations. So Scholar Cowl, Cleric Cowl, and Soldier Helmet. Like he's tried all three of them. Now, in my personal opinion, I think you should be using some kind of a cloth armor in your helmet right now, so no soldier helmets. And the reason I say that is just because they recently buffed that force field skill on the cloth helmets. How do I show this? Rankings, Humperdinck. Here we go. So this skill right here has recently been buffed so that it always sends you back 14 meters no matter what your CC resistance is or CC duration buffs are, right? So even against people wearing plate armor, this will always send them back a set distance, which makes this really useful for killing people on mobs and on fire traps. And actually, last time I fought Humperdinck, he did kill me on a fire trap. And Frost, by the way, is really good at killing people on fire traps because I have CC, right? So they can knock you into a fire trap and then hit you with an E, and then you're just stuck there taking a crap load of damage, right? So, yeah. So if you are gonna copy his build, I do recommend a cloth helmet because of that. Alright, so quickly we're gonna move on. Now, you probably noticed that I skipped over a whole lot of people, and we're just gonna take a look at those people and talk about why. So first we look at Kraken's build. We talked about why we skipped DM Rack, and then we look at Kraken's build, and you'll see that there's actually a lot of people on this ladder board that are playing Kraken's exact build, right? So this guy's playing it, I think this guy is also playing it, so Kraken, and then that's 2, that's 3, this is the one-hand dagger, and then here's 4. So on this page, on this first page of 9 people, there's 4 people playing this Quarterstaff build. I think that's a really good sign that this is a good build, or at least it's a good build for climbing the ladder board. In my opinion, I hate this build. I think it's garbage because it has that damage issue. Like, it doesn't do that much damage by itself. So it kind of relies on killing people on mobs, like a lot of the times. So that's not really like my favorite way to play corrupted dungeons, so that's why I'm biased against this build. But all these people are having success with it, so it's obviously like a really good build for the purpose of climbing the infamy ladder board. And if that's what you're playing corrupted dungeon for, then this is definitely a build that you should be looking at. Alright, so we looked at Humper already, we're gonna move on. And also, by the way, there's this guy that I forgot to mention. We skipped over him as well. He is still playing Hallowfall. He's gotta be like the most patient guy in the world right now. So Hallowfall, the Q1 Hallowfall build, this does still work in corrupted dungeons, and it works really well. But the issue with it is, without that, with a nerf to the E, the chase potential of this build is significantly weaker than before. And even before the nerf, it wasn't like that good at killing kite builds like Baton bows, for example. It just takes forever for you to kill a Baton bow player with this build, even before the nerf. And now with the nerf to the cooldowns on your E, like you're just not gonna be able to chase down a Baton bow. And there's so many Baton bows out there right now. So basically, like you're no longer guaranteed a kill with this build, right? Before you have that infinite ability to chase people, now you don't have that, right? So a lot of people are saying, well, the PvE with this build is just absolutely garbage, and it's so much effort to, it takes you like freaking 30 minutes to clear a dungeon just to get to the next guy, and then the next guy is probably just gonna run away from you, right? So that's why a lot of people have abandoned this build. But our boy Pin here is still staying on this build. Alright, moving on from him, we got one here. He is playing a Frost build, and one plays a lot of Plate Frost as well. But I think he abandoned that probably because of all the kite builds, because the Knight Armor doesn't really help you against Baton bows, right? So that's probably why he switched to the Assassin Jacket, which, it's still really good for kiting, and it's still good for, like, getting away from people that are like using hard chase skills. Like for example, if they're using Wanderlust, if they run at you with Wanderlust, you just turn on your stealth and you wait out their boots, and then you float away from them, and they can't do anything to you. So it's still really good, but it gives you a lot more damage than if you were to run Knight Armor, right? So that's the plus side of it. The Knight Armor build like really has issues killing anything that is not a melee, but the Assassin Jacket helps you a lot with that. Alright, so we're gonna move on again. By the way, one is also kind of an outlier, just like Humperdinck. They're playing One Hand Frost, and there's really not that many other people playing One Hand Frost with this kind of success. If you keep scrolling down on this list and just clicking everyone's name, you're probably not gonna see another One Hand Frost up here. Okay, we're just gonna keep moving quickly, and the Bloodletter build. So this build right here, the one that died, this build right here, this is basically my old double reflect Bloodletter build, right? People still play this, as you can see, but I think like in current meta against Baton bows especially, like this is really not doing good right now. I had to switch off of this build to try something else. Because of all the kite builds in here, and not just against Baton bows, like even Quarterstaffs are really hard to deal with this build. Just because like there's so many people running builds that are, like they do a little damage to you and then they run away, and if you burn a defensive, well, now you're not gonna have that Hunter Hood, you're not gonna have that Assassin Jacket, right? So it's really hard to play against that kind of players using this build. And if you are a Bloodletter player, like this build right here with the plate armor, I think this is probably the better option now for, like, if you're trying to climb the ladder board with a Bloodletter. Like this is probably what you want to use now, is the old school Bloodletter plate build. And reason for that is just because it does better against those hit and run kind of builds, because of the fact that you have your Guardian helmet to counter a lot of their poke damage, and also in longer fights against those hit and run kind of builds. In longer fights, you have Scholar Sandals, which helps you with the mana issue that this other build has. In long fights, this build will definitely run out of mana. Like if you're chasing a Baton bow that's just kiting you forever, like you're definitely gonna run out of mana from spamming Qs, and this guy will have less mana issues because of Scholar Sandals, and also Scholar Sandals gives you that CC resistance, which is again really good against those Quarterstaff players, right? So this build right here for the Bloodletter is what I would recommend for anybody that's still using Bloodletter in this meta. Alright, so next up we have Sorcerers and his Chillhowl build. Now, I've seen Sorcerers flip-flop back and forth between the Cultist Robe and Mistcaller version of the build, and now he's on this Scholar Robe and Tome version of the build. Now, I think it makes total sense that he's using this version of the build now in this meta, because in this meta there's a lot of those Baton bows that are just gonna hit you with their E and run away. There's a lot of those Quarterstaffs that are just gonna stun you and run away, right? So against those people, it's you have these really small windows to push through a kill anyway, right? So you probably want to go for this like higher burst damage build to take advantage of those smaller kill windows. And also, all of those builds that we looked at earlier, all those meta builds, they all have something in it to interrupt the Cultist Robe. So the Cultist, that makes it hard for you people to like actually use the Cultist Robe, right? So that's probably the reason why Sorcerers is using this version of the build now. If we tab over, we can see there's there's a bunch of people using Chillhows, and you see the majority of them are building with either the Cultist Robe version or the Scholar Robe version, right? And those are, credits to Sorcerer. As far as boots go, a lot of them are using Sandals of Purity. Some of them are using leather shoes for regular run, and like they will do refreshing. By the way, like the regular boots, I think most of them are using regular run when they're actually doing PvP, and refreshing sprint is only for PvE. Okay, so sometimes in the lower brackets, I see people using refreshing sprint on the frost for like actual PvP. I'm not sure why they do that really. Regular run it's a better run skill than refreshing sprint. Refreshing sprint is more of a skirmish skill. So anyway, regular run for the boots if you're not using Sandals of Purity, and you see here there's also people using the Assassin Jacket with the Chillhowl. I think this version of the build is really more related to the Plate Frost build that we talked about earlier, the one that one uses, and how some people are using his or actually how he is now using the Plate Frost build but with a one-hit frost. Well, there's also people using that build with a Chillhowl, but this is really more related to that Plate Frost build than it is to the Sorcerer build. Alright, so moving on. Okay, I know we're way past the first page now, but there's a build that I feel like I have to talk about, and that's his Tomb Hammer build. This is again nothing new, but it's something that we should really look at, and it's a really strong build. I think the version that most people have seen is this right here. I think this is pretty much what Leos runs. Leos, another streamer by the way, and I think what's his name? Nazori, another really good Tomb Hammer player. I think he played this version of the build before too on his stream, right? So this is a probably like better known version of the build, but in my opinion this here is a better version of the build, because I think in this whole hit and run kind of meta, you kind of have to either adjust to it by playing a hit and run kind of build yourself, or playing a build that can really kill on one engage. And I know for a fact that even when you're full stacked on soldier armor, you're not gonna just one shot someone with this build. Especially or maybe you can one shot someone or near one shot someone that's wearing cloth armor. But out of all the builds that we've looked at so far, we've seen so many plate armors, we've seen so many leather armors. There's really only one build, that frost build, that's using cloth armor. Everything else is either like mercenary jacket or hunter jacket or some kind of plate armor, right? So I think it's gonna be really hard to just like one shot people with something like this, and it's much more realistic to go for a longer fight version of the build, which is what this is. And this knight armor version, like knight armor, guardian helmet, floaty sandals, like this is a pretty standard way to play a kite build, and that's what this Tomb Hammer build is, right? It's a kite build. You stun people in your demon cape, you keep them in combat with your stuns and your poison ticks and whatnot, and eventually you whittle them down and you kill them because they can't outrun you because you have floaty sandals and you have your W, which is 15-second cooldown, right? It's a really high mobility build. It's hard to run away from this build, and it's hard to full engage on this build. And you can't really out-kite them either because they got the Guardian helmet, so they take away a lot of your poke damage, right? So I think this is like a stronger version of the build. This is perhaps a manlier version of the build, but I just don't think it works as well in the current meta. Alright, so those are all the builds we're going to talk about for this video. Now, keep in mind that the reason why I make these meta discussion videos is not to force everybody to play the same builds. It's to give the newer players a place to start, but also to give the returning players or the more experienced players a kind of expectation, so that if you're just like coming back to Corrupted Dungeons, well, you can look at this video and pretty much be able to tell what everybody else is playing, so you can know how to play against them, right? Now, I know we're in this like annoying kite meta, and a lot of people are really having a hard time dealing with all the kiting builds in here. So in the next video, I'll be showing you one of my answers to the kite meta, and if you want to be updated when that video comes out, make sure you like and sub to this channel and click that notification bell. And if you have time to catch me while I'm live on Twitch, there will be a Twitch link in the descriptions below. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.